getting towards the end now. How do you get started? The free service. There's an always free tier. And the always free tier is quite incredible. And you've already got the link for where you create your accounts. The always free tier, there's a description here of what you get. It's quite a lot. You get 2 ADBs, 2 compute VMs, 1 load balancer. There are strict limitations on CPU, RAM, and storage. And whenever you're using always free, you are continually getting pop-ups saying, hey, you know, if you want to do more, you'll have to go to a paid for account. Well, fair enough. But the always free, it's pretty good. And for many developers, it may well be enough. It may well be enough. You get quite a lot there. Yeah, there's quite a lot kicking around in that. But you wouldn't want to use it for production environments, of course. Now, let's see. What's your typical usage look like of an ADB environment? You'll have an internet-facing load balancer. That's going to receive URLs from the outside world. I'm assuming we're talking web applications rather than direct SQL+ connections. SQL+ connections will certainly work. You can go through the VPN Connect and do it that way, for instance, get a persistent SQLnet connection. But the majority of sites, I imagine, will be internet-facing. That comes through a load balancer. And that's where you deploy your digital certificates and where you set up your custom domains. So you'll be setting CNAME records over your DNS to route your custom domain name to the load balancer's address. The load balancer will then send HTTP and so on, and HTTPS, through typically to your application tier virtual machines, which on the previous slide, perhaps rather confusingly, are called compute VMs. And these are just virtual machines on which you deploy anything. So if, as production sites will probably want to do, you want to have your own URLs, you want to configure your own awards, your own connection pools, you'll be configuring that on your application tier virtual machines. Then you'll have an ADB behind. Certificates on the load balancer, DNS map custom domains to the load balancer, VPN Connect direct connections, or you could open up ports to nominated addresses. And it's probably going to look, in my horrible diagram, this would be not an untypical environment. You've got the outside world where your users are hitting the load balancer. That acts as your firewall, which takes you to your virtual private cloud in the OCI environment. And whether the load balancer does any load balancing is open to debate. You don't have to have 2 compute nodes behind it. You could have only 1. And the load balancer will still be doing the functionality of protecting you from attack from dodgy people around the world. So we call it a load balancer, but it's more than that. Think of it as a firewall router. But the way I've sketched it here, it is actually doing load balancing as well. So 2 compute nodes perhaps, and this is the sort of environment that we would typically configure, an Apache and Tomcats to which we deploy awards. Behind them, you've got, in my example here, 2 databases, an autonomous transaction processing database, an autonomous data warehouse. And that's where we get the SQLnet connections coming in. And here, of course, we are in the protected area. So that will be a not untypical environment. Now,
John, is it a multi-server, web server and database server, or is it 2? It's got to be 2.
It's got to be 2 autonomous databases.
All right.
They are, of course, racked and data guarded, but that's out of our control. Yeah, so this would be buying or renting 2 autonomous databases.
Very good, thank you.
And how big can it get? I mean, when Oracle talks big, they mean the size of Jupiter. So the shared environment scales up to 64 OCPUs. No CPU is a core, basically. The amount of memory you get depends on the shape of the machine, of the VM you're buying, or the shape of the ADB you buy, and massive amounts of storage. If you need more than that, that's where it probably becomes more cost effective to go for a dedicated environment in an Oracle data center, or conceivably ADB on premises. And once you go to that, there is of course no limit to scale. What do you get for it? You get an incredible amount. It's Enterprise Edition plus all of this lot. So you get some really expensive in memory, and that's something like a 45% uplift on your license, and that's included. Partitioning, RAT, compression, and all of this lot, and these individually are probably only about a 20% uplift on your license. But overall, if you do the arithmetic on this, you're getting, I don't know, $150,000 worth of software per core included in your ADB license, which is quite phenomenal. Oddly enough, that brings up a problem. What if you don't need all of that? I said at the beginning we'd have a word on cost, and it's going to be a short word because I'm not competent to discuss that in any detail, and this isn't the purpose of our hour today. ADB is Enterprise Edition plus all the extras. It looks to me to be very attractively priced. In terms of bring your own license or buying your own license, it looks to me as though it's phenomenally cheap. It's almost as though all you're paying for is the annual maintenance, just paying per month or per hour. You only seem to be paying the maintenance cost, and you get the actual license and the hardware for free. That seems to be the way it looks to me. So it's phenomenally cheap if you need those facilities. What, however, if you are an SE2 shop? Well, if you are an SE2 environment and you really don't need, previous slide, all of this lot, you don't need parallel processing, you don't need Resource Manager, all the other stuff you get with Enterprise Edition, then the costing becomes problematic. And at that point, I suspect you would find that a more cost-effective issue is to use compute nodes only. So rather than ADB, you buy or rent compute nodes, license included. Right? And that gives you a very cost-effective solution for SE2, very cheap for SE2, but you have to administer it yourself. You have to do the database administration, much of the database administration, not all, but a lot of the database administration. You have to do a lot of the operating system administration yourself. So is that good or bad? I'm not going to comment. Just bear in mind, it seems to me that ADB is very cost effective if you need it, but if you can work on some rock bottom environment, it may not be the cheapest option in the OCI world.